plan to be there.
No, you can't plan to be there. You have a career, a PhD.
So what should I do? What do you advise?
Buy a dog and die alone. Buy a dog and
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
Buy a dog, die alone. Hardly the winning slogan for a pet store owner, but certainly the perfect catchphrase to come up with if it's your intention to cause a media wildfire.
Say what?
This phrase didn't really start out as a catchphrase. Eventually, it became one, but initially, it was a set of options offered up by the late Kevin Samuels. Yes, late, as in passed away. And no sooner than hearing of his passing, his phrase became a focal point, trending on social media. Buy a dog, die alone. But not so much the first part, but the second part of the phrase.
We're all gonna die! We're all gonna freaking die!
Die alone. It is the dying alone that I would bet most people find problematic. It's a phrase that drums up fear in the receiver of the message. It conjures up the idea of suffering in solitude with no one to help you as you slowly deteriorate in your helpless state as Fido licks your face until you ultimately pass away.
bruh.
Which some say that the untimely death of Kevin Samuels was his ironic karma for having said die alone to so many people. His karma. But was it really? That depends on how you look at it. That depends on what the context behind the phrase is. Not everyone has a dog, but everybody dies. At least once, right? In this next clip, Kevin Samuels attempts to belabor the point to a very clever woman who has called into his show. Her clever remarks are clearly getting under his skin. But good thing for us, it was this annoying clever call that caused Kevin Samuels to clarify just what he means when he says, buy a dog, die alone.
What advice would I give for women because statistics show women outlive men?
Yes.
What do you mean, what advice would I give you?
What advice or suggestions on selecting a high quality man? If we outlive men,
How old are you?
I am 25.
Okay. Life expectancy of men of all races is shorter than the women.
Correct.
Why is that a problem?
So are we going to die alone anyway?
But did you live alone?
I'm still going to die alone if my husband dies
Well,
before
if you
me.
want to get philosophical about it, everybody dies alone.
So my question is, what advice
ma'am.
would you give for women?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. What I'm saying is your question doesn't really make any sense because women outlive men of any race, any socioeconomic status. That's just a factor of being male or female. Nothing that we can really do anything about.
So we're going to die alone then, basically.
Ma'am, everybody freaking dies alone.
Exactly.
Right down to it. I mean, you're being silly.
I'm not being silly.
You are
said
being
it's
silly.
better to die
You are being
alone.
Either you're being silly or if you're being serious. You were born alone, you're gonna die alone. In the absolute value strictest sense. Do you have a real question?
So even if you're blissfully married to the man or woman of your dreams, you can go to the store, leave your spouse at home alone, and come home to find that your spouse died. They died alone, right? So what's the significance other than to state the inevitable fate of everyone with the phrase buy a dog or die alone? The truth is, that's not what he was talking about. And the problematic thing with that phrase was that he was using a situation that most people fear, which is death, to communicate how she will live. But what I believe is that had he said what he really meant, the sense of urgency would not communicate as effectively had he not used the choice of words that he did, out of fear that the listener would fall back into a state of complacency. So think of it this way. If there was a woman that said that it was her life's desire to be married and have a family of her own, yet you observed that the course of action that she was taking did not align with the ways of her ancestors and not so distant predecessors, yet she was stubbornly convinced that the way that she was doing things was the way to do things. Now, had he approached her saying,
"Hey, you can keep going the way that you're going and you'll never be married,"
well, she can shrug her shoulders and say,
"So what? I have 5 kids that will look after me, and I keep a boyfriend. Plus, I have girlfriends that will check in on me, so I'm good."
and the point will be lost. I wonder if anyone has ever said something like that. Big Shirley? Who is Big Shirley? Taken from a reoccurring character on the TV show Martin.
Here you go, Big Shirley. And by the way, where'd you get the nickname Big?
Big Shirley is a name used to describe a large or heavyset woman, while there were multiple instances where Mr. Samuels referred to different women as Big Shirley.
Who is this? Is that Big Shirley? What have I said that's wrong, Big Shirley?
We'll take a look at one of them.
I'm supposed to settle for a regular type dude.
Fresh face out of the shower, your natural face. You can't use 7. What would you rank yourself? 1 to 10.
A 6.
If you're average to cute looking, if you're below average health from a weight standpoint, and you have 2 children, overall, does that make you below average, average, or above average? Factor all those things in together.
Average.
So why should you get anything over? Then why should you get above average? What do you mean settle for? You should get what you are.
I see millionaires with average women all the time.
Why should an average woman say she's settling for an average man? Listen, you said, so I should just settle for an average guy. And I'm like, you're an average woman. Why should you not get?
I would be settling. I mean,
why would you be settling and he wouldn't? So what would he be doing? Would he be upgrading?
He don't got no money. So if he don't have no money,
you ain't fine enough for no money.
I'm not fine enough for money.
No, you're 6. You're 5. You said you're 6, ma'am. You said you're 6. You don't get money. You get second shift at the plant.
I already have everything that I need. If he's not adding to me, then that will be settling, right?
I ask this question oftentimes with black women. If you have to work as hard today or harder if you want children with a husband, would you rather have a husband or be single? And almost 100% of the time, black women would say, if I have to work as hard as I am today with a husband, I'd rather be single, because a husband is not just by being a man ain't enough. He's supposed to make her life easier. That is why I have no problem telling women to die alone. It is not our job to make women's lives easier. It's our job to protect, provide, but that's not necessarily easy. It's harder. Relationships are hard. So ma'am, you got all the things you need except somebody to share life with.
So this particular woman that was labeled as a Big Shirley was overlooking good men because she felt that she was too good for them. She didn't want a man who could not afford to give her everything that she wanted. Mr. Samuels was trying to tell her that her chances of marrying a 1% man in her current physical, parental, and age state is less than likely. and that if she was adamant about overlooking all of these good men because of her inflated ego or otherworldly estimation of her future, that she would more than likely die unmarried. If you are a woman over 200 pounds and Tyrone makes $40K a year, and he likes all 200 pounds of you, but you have your eyes set on Jerome, who makes $4 million a year and only dates light-skinned 120-pound models, your chances of marrying a Jerome are less than 1%. But your chances of marrying a Tyrone is looking good. But you won't marry Tyrone because Tyrone is nothing to brag about to your girlfriends. He doesn't add a notch or stripe to the "you go girl" belt. So everybody dies. It is not entirely in one's own power to determine when or how they die, but it is in one's own power to determine when or how they choose to live. Dying alone is not what the message was about, for death is inevitable. Dying alone in relation to the context of the conversation meant to have reached the end of your life, never achieving the marriage that you say you want. The message was not that marriage is impossible for Big Shirley, but that Big Shirley felt that she was too good for a good man who was not rich. Because in one breath, you say that you want to get married, but then in another, your expectations are unreal. So if you aren't getting wifed up by the 1%, and yet you refuse to marry the men who are not in the 1%, but you are adamant about sharing your love and affection with someone, then a dog is your best bet, is what he was trying to communicate. There are some who look at the death of Mr. Samuels and say, well, look at him. He did all of that talking about dying alone, and that's just what he got. But that only has the impact if your intention was to be married at the time of your death, which for Mr. Samuels was not a priority. The truth is, it's in the phrase, die alone. Alone actually means single, unmarried. So by that metric, if it gives any solace to those who cheered when he passed away, well, then yes, alone means single, single meaning unmarried. He was unmarried when he died, so he died alone. But certainly not with a dog. And certainly not lonely. What it means is, with a precious poodle at your side, it may keep you company, for you may breathe your last before you ever get what you say that you want, if you don't ground yourself to reality and see that time is of the essence. Whether you subscribe to the man or not is not a matter of concern, but as far as the message, that's all that it means.
Everybody dies alone. So I don't understand what you're asking. A strategy. Okay, here's a strategy. What you do is you marry a guy that's 20 years younger than you. Then you can, there you go. But do you also deal with his pockets and his inability to provide, his inability to do a lot of things, but you make sure that you die before him. There you go. Since you have a question that you want to answer. What the French freaking toast are we talking about here? I don't know. Well, everybody dies alone. Well, here's what you do. What you do is you coordinate like you both take cyanide capsules at the exact same time. Here's yours, here's mine. Ready? 1, 2, 3. And you can go simultaneously. You can come and go at the same time.